Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. Hello and welcome to the infamous Golden Toilet Awards. Modern Horizons 2 has a lot of new and exciting commanders that have inspired players everywhere. And then there's the ones that are up for this award. Unfortunately for these commanders, this is not the type of award that you actually want to win. These commanders might be bland, or they may be uninspiring, or they might just make you question as to why they're actually a card at all. But regardless, the winner of this award will be receiving the Golden Toilet of Modern Horizons 2. No expenses were spared on this incredible toilet statue from Amazon. And of course, the commander will not only keep this trophy, but the shame that comes along with it forever. Now, commanders can be considered for this award for a multitude of reasons, some of which that I've already mentioned. But at the end of the day, the commanders that I select for this episode are completely based off of my own opinions. So the commanders that you personally might select for this award might be very different, and that's okay. In fact, your very favorite commander from Modern Horizons 2 might win the Golden Toilet Award, and if that happens, my apologies in advance. And just a quick note, this is not a list of the weakest commanders from Modern Horizons 2. This is simply a list of my least favorite commanders from Modern Horizons 2, or another way to say it would be, the worst commanders, in my opinion, from Modern Horizons 2. Again, there can be many different reasons as to why you might not like a certain commander, and I'm going to try my best to illustrate why I don't like these. And one last thing, a big thank you to Eddie for all the great discussions on the set as well as the commanders from it. And of course, as always, if I make absolutely any mistakes in this episode or my other episodes, make sure you, in the comments, blame Eddie, because it's his fault. With all that said, let's start off with the runners-up for this infamous award. And we're starting things off at number 7 with Thrasta Tempest Roar. And really quick, a quick note as to why it was number 7 and not number 10 like it usually is. Well, there was only 17 commanders in total in Modern Horizons 2. And spoiler alert, that probably means that the other 10 are up for the Golden Pig Award, but I'm not going to confirm that here. Regardless, back to Thrasta Tempest Roar, a 7/7 dinosaur with trample and haste that costs 10 green. It has this spell cost 3 less to cast for each other spell cast this turn, and trample over planeswalkers, which is a very funny phrase. Essentially, this creature can deal excess combat damage to the controller of the planeswalker that it's attacking. So it just runs over the planeswalker and hits the player, which again is really funny. Anyways, Thrasta Tempest Roar has hexproof as long as it entered the battlefield this turn. So Thrasta is very similar to one of my personal commanders with Galta. So I actually been wanting to call this commander Smalta, because you know it's a smaller, and in my opinion a much worse, Galta. Like Galta, Thrasta also costs 12 mana in total, but it does have cost reduction. It costs 3 less to cast for each other spell that you cast this turn. So if you cast, say, 3 other spells in the turn, you can nearly completely negate that generic mana cost. A 7/7 trample and haste that can overkill planeswalkers and it temporarily has hexproof is pretty decent in commander. Or I should say it's a pretty decent threat as a commander. Regardless, unlike Galta, this is not going to be easy to cast and definitely not easy to continuously cast. Now, say that you had access to blue and access to a ton of low-to-the-ground cantrips, sure. But since you're in green, you don't. You have a few, but not a lot. So if you want to cast a bunch of spells to reduce the cost of this, well, you're probably not going to be refilling your hand. So maybe you blow through 3 spells to get your commander's mana cost down to a reasonable amount, and then you can spend another 3 mana to cast your commander. And then if your commander dies, you've got to cast more spells to try to reduce that cost again, but your hand's probably going to be pretty empty. Now if it had hexproof permanently, sure, it could stay around for longer, but it's only for 1 turn. So you get 1 swing in, and then your opponents are like, okay, that was cute, goodbye. Regardless if you're building a deck around this though, you're still probably going to want some really low to the ground spells that replace themselves, or at least as many as you can find with things like Mishra's Bauble and Charge Through. There can be other utility spells as well, but you're really going to want to focus on ones that replace themselves or provide some sort of card advantage. You're also going to want to find ways to make Thrasta even deadlier with something like Fire Shrieker to turn into a 2-shot kill instead of a 3-shot kill. But in my opinion, there's one word that could have saved this commander, and that could have made it into one that probably made my Golden Pig Awards instead of my Golden Toilet Awards, and that word is Flash. And I'm not talking about Flash Gordon or that DC superhero, I am talking about the ability to cast this commander at instant speed. That could have saved Smalta and turned it all around. Regardless, if you are building around this commander, please include cards that give it Flash. For example, Savage Summoning is an instant that says, Savage Summoning can't be countered, the next creature card you cast this turn can be cast as though it had Flash. That spell can't be countered, that creature enters the battlefield with additional +1/+1 counter on it. So by casting this, your commander is now 3 mana cheaper because you cast it, and you can cast your commander as though it had Flash. By doing that, you are taking into account all the spells that are being cast on an opponent's turn. So if an opponent has a very low to the ground deck or a Spellslinger deck or whatnot, they're going to be casting a lot of spells in a turn. By giving your commander Flash, you get to take advantage of that and utilize that as cost reduction. So essentially by your opponents casting spells, they're essentially helping you pay for your commander's cost. Again, if only the word Flash was on this commander, even just take off the trample over Planeswalkers. I know it's funny, but I would rather have Flash. It would have saved it. Regardless, as much as I want it to be, it's not on there, so utilize cards instead like Yeva Nature's Herald and Emergent Zone to again give it Flash. Yeva does this permanently as long as she's in play. In Emergent Zone, you do have to sacrifice, but it is a land, so it's not really taking up a slot in your deck. Oh, Smalta, what could have been if it was just for one word that you had? But alas, because of that missed word, you are not in the Golden Pig Awards, but you are trapped here at number 7 in the Golden Toilet Awards. Next up though, let's move on to number 6 with another near miss for the Golden Pig Awards, but for a completely different reason with Grist the Hunger Tide. Grist is a planeswalker that starts off at 3 loyalty that costs 1 black-green. As long as Grist the Hunger Tide isn't on the battlefield, it's a 1/1 insect creature in addition to its other types. The +1 is create a 1/1 black and green insect creature token, then mill a card. If an insect card was milled this way, put a loyalty counter on Grist and repeat this process. The -2 is you may sacrifice a creature. When you do, destroy a target creature or planeswalker. And the -5 is each opponent loses life equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. So I will admit, I really do like the synergies of this card. Being able to mill yourself for a ton, hitting insect after insect after insect, and then being able to drain your opponents for a ton is great. But here's the problem. And if you don't want to hear me get a little salty, I recommend skipping on to number 5. I don't like planeswalkers as commanders. I just don't. Am I salty about planeswalkers being commanders? Yes. Do I recognize that? Yes. Am I going to change my mind about it? Probably not. So for me, that's one major knock against this card. And to be honest, if there were more commanders in this set, it probably wouldn't have been in this award at all had it not been for one other thing. Nowhere on this card does it say that Grist can be your commander. Every other planeswalker that can be your commander has the text, can be your commander, or it's a 2-sided card and one of these sides is a creature. There is a rule change for Grist that is coming down the pipeline because, it says as long as it is on the battlefield, it's a 1/1 insect creature. And usually that only affects in-game stuff, so you wouldn't be able to just, build a deck around it because technically, outside the game, it's not a creature. So for deck construction purposes, it's not a legendary creature, meaning that you couldn't build around it. Except, Wizards just shoehorning in a rule change just to make it happen. Regardless, like I mentioned before, the concept of an insect tribal graveyard-based commander is pretty cool. And if these kind of effects were on a legendary creature, then I'd probably be all about it and it would probably be in the Golden Pig list. But it's not. But if, unlike me, you don't have a problem with planeswalkers as commanders, here's how I would build around this. First off, a ton of insects, especially useful ones like Caustic Caterpillar. Also make sure that you're considering changelings in that as well, because changelings are technically insects as well, and everything else too. Realmwalker is an especially good one because it lets you look at the top card of your library, so you know when you should activate your commander and when you shouldn't. And then a sacrifice outlet like Altar of Dementia can be very impactful as well, letting you sacrifice your insects to mill yourself further. Again, the more creatures that you have in your graveyard, the more you drain your opponents with that -5. Or, you can just dump essentially your entire library into your graveyard by swapping it with your graveyard with Morality Shift. It says exchange your graveyard and library, then shuffle your library. So yeah, they just basically swap. Another fantastic way though to really utilize that +1 is with something like Forever Young. It says put any number of target creature cards from your graveyard on top of your library, draw a card. So you put an absurd number of insects on top of your library, you +1 with Grist, and then it just repeats over and over again, milling you further, making you a ton of insects and getting a lot of loyalty counters. And of course, out of your -5, you can really punish opponents with something like Sir Conrad. Essentially, Sir Conrad punishes your opponents whenever creatures go here, there, or anywhere in relation to the graveyard. Now, with my placement of Grist at number 6 in the Golden Toilet Awards, I think the main question is, am I being reasonable? The answer is probably not, but I don't care. So Grist, congratulations on your 6th placement in the Golden Toilet Awards. But now it's time for us to move on to number 5 with Captain Ripley Vance. Now, I believe that Captain Ripley Vance is the only uncommon commander from the set, and it definitely doesn't impress. Now, at some point in the past, I may have given a pass on that, but we've seen plenty of exciting uncommon commanders, so there's no exceptions here based on rarity. Regardless, Captain Ripley Vance is a 3/2 human pirate that costs 2 and a red. It has whenever you cast your 3rd spell each turn, put a +1 counter on Captain Ripley Vance, then deals damage equal to its power to any target. Again, like Thrasta, you've got to dump a ton of spells for a potential payoff, and that payoff might not even be that big. I mean, if the payoff was something like each player exiles the top card of their library, you may cast one of those for free this turn, then great, but it's not. It's just, hey, this gets slightly larger and ping something. So it's pretty weak and pretty uninspiring in my opinion. But if you decide to build a deck around this commander, I recommend using cards like Expedite and Urza's Bauble. Again, like Thrasta, you want low-to-the-ground cantrips that replace themselves and that don't cost you a lot of mana. You're also going to want to look for other ways to pump Captain Ripley like Blackblade Reforged. Trying to get counters from that trigger is going to be pretty slow and take a long time and a lot of resources, so utilize other things to do so. You're also going to want ways to double up that damage and make it more impactful with things like Gratuitous Violence, Ceramic Resonator, and Grafted Exoskeleton. Gratuitous Violence says if a creature you control deal damage to a creature or player, it deals double that damage to that creature or player instead. So now that trigger is going to hit twice as hard. And speaking of that trigger, Ceramic Resonator has pay 2 and tap it, copy target triggered ability you control, you may choose new targets for the copy. So again, we can hit something twice as hard or hit 2 separate things. And then of course there's Grafted Exoskeleton, which is a great win condition for this commander. It gives +2/+2 and Infect. So first off, it gets Captain Ripley up to 5 power. With another piece of equipment or some more +1 counters, you can get into a one-shot kill range. Again, there was some potential there with that, whenever you cast your 3rd spell each turn, but the more and more that you read, the less interesting this commander gets, in my opinion. If there was a different payoff for that trigger, it could have been much more impactful. So, Captain Ripley Vance, you definitely have earned your spot at number 5. But now it's time to move on to number 4 with Ave Progenitor Ooze. Ave is a 2/2 ooze with Storm that costs 2 green. Yes, you heard me right, a legendary creature with Storm. And when I read that, I was so excited and I couldn't hide it. And then I read the rest of this card and my excitement completely faded. Ave Progenitor Ooze isn't legendary if it's a token. Okay, so that's good, I like that part. But then it enters the battlefield, a +1 counter on it for each other ooze you control. This card had so much potential to do something cool. I mean, Storm in the command zone? Come on. But now you're just giving me a couple of copies of this and they're just like slightly bigger? Boo. I mean, again, like I mentioned with Smalta, green's not the best with a lot of low-to-the-ground cantripping spells. So casting a bunch of spells to up our Storm count can be a big investment with this kind of a deck, and it also can be pretty risky too. And again, for that risk of utilizing a lot of our cards, the payoff is, well, very underwhelming. I mean, even the copies don't even have trample. The concept had potential, and yes, I know that Storm is a dangerous mechanic that you gotta be careful with, but come on, it could have been something better than this. If there's a way to make a Storm commander extremely safe and extremely bland, it's this. Now, yes, you can utilize Ooze for an Ooze tribal deck, but there's really not all that many in mono green, and again, you want low-to-the-ground Oozes if you can, so you can get that Storm count up. So, Experiment 1 and changelings like Universal Automaton are some of your better options. Of course, Acidic Slime can be a good utility card as well, but again, there's only so many good ooze cards out there. Now, of course, you can have a big impact if you get other oozes out like Mitotic Slime, Bio-Waste Blob, and Biogenic Ooze, but again, there's not many to pick from. Mitotic Slime, when it dies and dies again, can make you a bunch of oozes for your commander to get even bigger when it comes into play. Or do I say commanders? I don't know what they storm in token creation. Regardless, you know what I mean. And then Bio-Waste Blob can pump them further and further as it keeps splitting and making more and more of it. And then Biogenic Ooze brings a friend along with it and can make more and can make all your oozes bigger throughout the game, but again, you are limited to very few oozes that are actually impactful in Commander. Regardless, at the end of the day, in my opinion, the very first Storm Commander, which I was very excited about at first, just fell flat. Seeing Storm on a Commander is exciting, but seeing an overly safe and bland Storm Commander is not. So because of that, Ave, you've earned your spot at number 4. And speaking of wasted potential, let's move on to number 3 with Zabaz the Glimmer Wasp. Zabaz is a 0/0 insect with modular 1 that costs 1. It has if a modular triggered ability would put 1 or more ++1 counters on a creature you control, that many +1/+1 counters are put on it instead. By paying a red, you destroy target artifact you control, and by paying a white, Zabaz the Glimmer Wasp gains flying until end of turn. Even with all the new cards for Modern Horizons, unfortunately, modular still is not a very supported mechanic. Modern Horizons 2 brought 8 modular creatures along with it, and that nearly doubled the amount of modular cards in Magic. So first off, even if you utilized every single modular card out there, there's not going to be all that many, and you're going to have a lot of gaps in your deck. Also, many of those modular creatures, especially some of the older ones, are, well, not all that good. So you're building around somewhat of an underwhelming mechanic with not a lot of support. Now, yes, there are other things that this commander can do, like, destroying your own artifacts, which is great with modular because, you can just say, hey, you're gone, now get your counters elsewhere. But I believe that this commander had so much more potential than what this is. I mean, something as simple as artifact creatures you control and artifact creatures that aren't on the board or whatnot, however you need to word it, artifact creatures wherever they're at in your deck have modular 1 or modular 2 or whatnot. Basically, just give all the artifact creatures in your deck modular. That way you aren't stuck with just 20 modular creatures to pick from in all of Magic. I mean, yes, Arcbound Worker, Scrapyard Recombiner, and Arcbound Shikari aren't bad. Arcbound Worker is very low to the ground, Scrapyard Recombiner can tutor for some more constructs, and Arcbound Shikari is gonna help you get more counters on your artifact creatures. But again, if you're forced to use the exact 20 modular creatures to make your deck effective, well, you've got some pretty terrible creatures. By opening this up to all artifact creatures, well, then you've got a chance to compete. Regardless, if you do want to compete with this deck, the direction that I would take it would be more so like a, Copa Girapur Voltron style kind of deck. So utilize cards like Duel's Heritage, which give your commander double strike. Usually you can get through on an opponent with flying, and again, that just costs you a white to do. You can also utilize artifacts that also want to go into your graveyard like Ichor Wellspring and Ugin's Nexus. Just paying a red to destroy them can give you a big benefit. Regardless, again, I think this commander had a lot of potential to push a mechanic that really doesn't see the light of day in Commander. Unfortunately, it fell very short because of a lack of support, and it didn't make up for that support with its abilities. So it might not be entirely Zabaz's fault, but I'm mad at it, so it's number 3. Anyways, next up, moving on to our runner-up for the Golden Toilet Award, we've got Turok Dread Cantor. Now, with sets like Modern Horizons and Commander Legends, we've gotten to see some amazing commanders of characters from Magic's past that have never had a commander card to their name. And finally, we get to see the incredible Turok! And it's incredibly disappointing! It's a 2/1 human cleric with kicker for black that costs 1 and a black. It has protection from white, and whenever an opponent discards a card, put a +1 counter on Turok Dread Cantor. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, target opponent discards 2 cards at random. So yep, this is just, kicker, him to Turok, commander, yay! And yes, I know that not every single legendary creature in sets are really meant for commander. But come on, Turok? You gotta make Turok bad? Like really, really bad? I mean, Turok is associated with brutal discard, so I was expecting this just impossibly awesome discard commander that is just gonna take over as the number 1 discard commander, and it's not. This is incredibly underwhelming. Yes, making someone discard 2 cards at random is great, but the payoff for your opponent's discarding is meh. my commander got slightly larger. And if you're playing a mono white deck, you can't block me. Unless you've got artifact creatures, of course. Yeah, for a name that is well known in Magic, the actual legendary creature on it is very disappointing. And I guess I probably should have mentioned the main reference card before, but Hymn to Turok is a very, very, very brutal discard card. It's essentially just the kicker on Turok, which again I will admit is pretty cool, but again the payoff is not. Now, of course, with this commander, you can get that kicker again if you, say, bounce it back to your hand or, recast from your command zone, but it's going to get quite expensive to do so. So, Erratic Portal can help you out, I guess. Obviously, you're going to want other ways to make multiple players discard cards with things like Elderfang Disciple, which again will get your commander 3+1/+1 counters, so, woo. And, of course, utilize other things like continuous discard like Bottomless Pit. But since you're probably not going to kill your opponents with your actual commander, you're probably just going to have to utilize other things like Liliana's Caress, and you're going to lean heavily on them. But if you're looking to play a mono-black discard deck, you're probably just going to stick with Tiny Bones Trinket Thief, which is actually a good discard commander. Yep, this tiny skeleton rogue is a better commander than the legendary Turok, known from Hymn of Turok. Now, if this commander wasn't Turok and it had a different name, would it finish here? Probably not. But the fact is, it did, and it does. So, it's number 2. But the commander at number 1 is definitely the commander that I'm most disappointed with, and therefore most deserving of the Golden Toilet Award. So, the winner of the Modern Horizons Golden Toilet Award is Asmaran Namar Dekad Estina Koldakar. That's as close as I'm gonna get, and I am not trying that again. I'm just gonna call this commander A, okay? A is a 3/3 human wizard with no mana cost because, again, that name is so long, there's no way you could fit a mana cost up there. A has, as long as you discarded a spell this turn, you may pay Rakdos to cast this spell. And when A enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a card named the Underworld Cookbook, reveal it, put in your hand, then shuffle. And finally, sacrifice 2 foods, target creature deals 6 damage to itself. The concept for this commander had so much potential. I mean, the flavor of this commander is just fantastic. Guillaume was a chef in Strixhaven that, fed your creatures food and protected them because that food made them more powerful or whatnot. This is a chef that, feeds creatures terrible food, and because of that, it hurts them. And this chef even comes along with a cookbook. And that cookbook can help you make food. The problem is, there's just far too much working against this commander. Remember when not too long ago I complained about modular not having much support? Well, food in Rakdos has essentially no support. Yeah, you can go get your cookbook, but other than that, you're not really working with much. And again, to actually damage creatures, you need to feed them 2 foods, not 1. So, yeah, your food's going to be a very rare resource that you have, and you've got to utilize a lot of it to actually have any effect. On top of that, you have to actually discard a card to be able to pay to get this commander out. So you very much can get stuck not being able to cast your commander if you don't have a way to discard a card. Now, of course, there are plenty of ways in Rakdos to discard cards, so something like Anya Falconwrath can really help you out, being a discard outlet that is repeatable. And of course, the Underworld Cookbook can help you out after you get it. It has tap, discard a card, create a food token. But again, unfortunately, your rate of return isn't all that great, and this is a very slow process to make food, and you need a lot of it to make this commander effective. But again, in these colors, outside of Witch's Oven, you've got access to, Foreboding Fruit? That might be a playable card in this deck. So you're going to have to make your commander even more impactful with things like Dictate of the Twin Gods to double up the damage so it can take out pretty much any creature. And maybe you've got to get a little kind of off the wall with something like Blim Comedic Genius to then give your opponent some really bad things like Phyrexian Negator, which says whenever it's dealt damage, sacrifice that many permanents. So you give your opponent the Phyrexian Negator, you feed it some food, it gets hurt, and then it makes your opponent sacrifice a lot of permanents. Again, there's a lot of workarounds and things that have to go right to actually make this commander effective. And again, there's a lot of workarounds to even get this commander in play. And though it can get you your cookbook, if you lose the cookbook, well, you're kind of out of luck when it comes to making food tokens. It's a cool concept for a commander, but it definitely came up short in my opinion. If it had a way to make even more foods, or if it just simply required less foods, then it'd probably be a different story, but it is what it is. So because of that, Asmaran Namar Dekad Estina Koldakar, okay, that's as good as it's gonna get, alright? You have won the Golden Toilet. Again, a big thank you to all the Modern Horizons 2 commanders that competed for this infamous award. And for our winner, A, your golden toilet is in the mail. And if you haven't seen my most recent episode on the Golden Pig of Modern Horizons 2, make sure you check it out because it's essentially the exact opposite of this. On that episode, I go through my picks of the best commanders of Modern Horizons 2, and one is awarded with the title of the Golden Pig. And again, best does not equal powerful, much like Golden Toilet does not equal weakest. But anyways, I hope that you enjoyed the Golden Toilet Awards, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.